Well, there were two bouncers. There was a bouncer that I wrote in, I think it was 1977, which was a two-hander that we took to the Edinburgh Festival. And it featured me and Peter Jeeves as two bouncers stood outside this disco, and John Bennett, who is now Dr. John Bennett at Liverpool Hope University, and Jill Nathanson. And the idea was, it was a very kind of absurd play. The two bouncers were called Tall and Short, and because I was tall and Pete was short, and we were stood outside this disco, and we humiliate anybody who came to the bar. And we took it to Edinburgh, and nobody came to see it. The first night, literally nobody came, and the second night, two people came. One was a critic from the Scotsman, and one was a drunk. And the drunk came on stage and started talking to us because I think he thought we were actually stood outside a real club. And the critic left, and we never got a review. On the third night, nobody came, so me and Pete got changed, and we just like stood and said, "Any tickets sold?" "No." "Okay." And then on the next night, the entire cast of Stephen Lowe's play Touch from Nottingham Playhouse came, including Brian Glover, who at that time was quite a well-known actor, who we went on to work with later in Up and Under. So we went to Edinburgh in 1977, and we were called Fresh from Bretton Hall, Fresh Theatre Company from Bretton Hall. And we took 43 posters to Edinburgh, and of course you need 43,000 posters. And we came back and it was an utter disaster. And then about 18 months later, a guy called Andy Winters had set up a company called Yorkshire Actors. And he said, what about turning that bouncers thing into something different? I said, well, why don't I turn it into a four-hander? And it had been on my mind for a long, long time, trying to make theatre that was like MTV, theatre that was very visceral. And then the idea for bouncers came to me over different periods of time, of these four guys who were on the door, who were very, very macho, but it's also something very absurd about it. And I thought, oh, maybe there's something around that. And this is now by about 1980, 1981. So I think the first bouncers came out around 1980, 1981. And at that time, the music was played for real. So we had somebody called Mandy Metro, who was the disc jockey. So the music couldn't get PRS clearance. So we played the music. Mandy played the LPs, mixed it live, and I didn't know what it was going to become. We were just young people wanting to make theatre that we thought was vibrant, and I guess that's how bouncers started. And when I came to Hull, and I got the job at Hull Truck, I'd already got that under my belt. So, and in truth, bouncers had played Spring Street Theatre in, I think, 1983. Late night had been booked. And I went to see it, and it was just a riot. I mean, people were laughing and going absolutely mad at it.
How's taekwondo? Still training? It sounds weak, you. Who'll train hamsters? How you training you?
Because in a way, it's not theatre. It's for stand-up comedians telling a story. So in a way, maybe it's because it felt like it was alive. And it was off the street, and there was nothing kind of cerebral or academic about it. It was absolutely energised. And actually, clubbing's not changed, has it? It's the same experience. And in a way, I don't think I could write bouncers now. I know too much about plays. It's interesting. The more you know about a subject, it can make it more difficult for you to be imaginative and original. And at that time, I just had bursts of energy in terms of wanting to write things. And that's why I think it's still current and alive, because the piece of work is very much, it needs actors. It's an organic piece of work. It's as good as the people are who are in it. You really have got to be athletic to do this play. And there was a production at the Liverpool Royal Court, that boisterous theatre company did, the Black Bouncers recently, which was fantastic. And it was just so utterly physical, mind-blowingly physical, almost like, Olympics on stage. But Bouncers is basically an empty box, empty space, a black box piece of work. And the audience are doing all the work with their imagination. It's interesting because even though we change it, the essence of the play is exactly the same as it was. It's some bloke stood on a door telling the story of one night in a club, and the nuances may change. Some of the reference points can change. And we did this version, and I was very happy with the kind of 2019 version. I thought it captured a modernity and how clubs had kind of morphed into a little bit more, if you like, gentrified on the face of it, kind of ambience. There were people who didn't like it. There were people, I'm not punters, I'm not press, but just folks I met in the street said, "Oh, I like it when it's in the 80s." And in a weird way, it is the 80s, because 80s was the kind of pinnacle of disco going and nightclub life and all that. And it'll be fascinating to see what happens post-COVID, to see what happens to clubs and vaccine passports and whether or not we're going to be policed even more. Don't forget, when I was growing up, there were no bouncers on pub doors. I mean, you went into a pub, and if there was a fight, there was a fight, and the landlord threw you out. These days, we are more and more policed by, security and door staff and female supervisors, call them what you will. And there are more female roles there as well, so that's an interesting kind of dynamic. Should there be a female bouncers?
It's been upgraded, and the bouncers are peng. Got outside, got on suit, gotta look cute when you get the boot.
You have to believe they're bouncers. Now even if they're big bouncers or small bouncers or female bouncers or male bouncers, you have to believe that they can handle themselves and that they are capable of being on the door of a club. That's number one. Truth is really important. From there, once you've got the main characters, the truth of the main characters, then you can start playing around with Baz and Trev and Kev, and then you can be playing Elaine and Maureen and all that kind of stuff. But what you can't do is send those characters up. So when they become the women, it's not supposed to be patronising. It's supposed to be a thumbnail sketch of the women. If you start going all pantomime on it, that is not the way to do bouncers. It's a suggestion. And you might want to read Breck's The Street Scene, where he says, you don't become King Lear, you show King Lear. And they show Baz, all right, Trev, Maureen, all right. Just little suggestions of things. And in there, don't forget with bouncers that you're always playing with theatre, because what you start by saying is, this play is called Bouncers, and we four bouncers will try and tell you about a night in a club. We four will try to illustrate the kind of things that happen late. They may not be successful, they say right at the beginning. But bear with us, it's a shared experience, a shared storytelling thing. And then they stop, don't they, and say, right, and now a speech by Eric. Look, Eric's first speech. Now, what's interesting in that is when you start to break illusions in the theatre by saying, don't forget it's a play, which Shakespeare did all the time, it becomes more fascinating. If there's a problem with bouncers in terms of a message, I should say it might be just too funny. I've seen audiences who've laughed at everything, and you're not supposed to laugh at everything because the speeches are very serious. But it's a very organic and plastic play, which it breaks out of a room. It can't be contained by the traditions of a room, and that's what I think makes it successful. There's four guys in tuxedos who are strutting around, and they're virtuoso performances, and that's always very attractive for an audience to see a bloke become one thing, become something else, then turn around and then what you're looking at, and all that kind of thing. That's quite mesmerising for an audience at times. And even though you want to create it, it's not always possible to do. You want to create work that's got an X factor, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes quite a piece of work will surprise you, and I guess bouncers keep surprising people. It's funny, it's dangerous, it's alive, it's sexy, it's a cautionary tale. It's bouncers.